Hey everybody, this is Michael with ShapeUp Fitness and Wellness Consulting. We're helping people get back from injury to performance and being able to sustain this for the rest of their life. Longevity is our gig. So today we're going to talk about training for your first marathon. All right, let's do this. Here's what you need to know before you get started. So number one of the biggest mistakes new marathoners make is start out too fast. Meaning if you have a race time over a 5K, like a shorter distance, and assuming that you do, because if you're planning a marathon, I'm sure you're not foolish enough to do that. Make that your first thing, your first race. You have done some other races, maybe shorter ones, 5K, 10K, half marathons. That time, if it's fairly recent, to figure out what your goal time would be for the marathon and then build your training plan based on that. So what is it if you don't have any clue? So there are some great resources out there in order to get a training plan for runners. Now, I provide that. I'm sure you have somebody where you're at. The key thing is you got to go and listen to your body. Personally, for example, for a long time, my body could not handle more than 3 days of running. Like, I would get hurt every single time. I built my training around 3 days of running, and then I would substitute with something else. And then over time, I added other days in, but I lowered the mileage on the other 3 days so that it would be an equivalent. And then it slowly built that up. So now I'm running 5 days a week. But even then, I don't run always on the same type of surface. For example, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I run on a treadmill. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I run on asphalt. And on Saturdays, I run on the trail. So I mix it up. Even on Tuesdays, I have a lever system that I'm using to deload myself. So I'm trying to do everything to manage the impact that the running has on my body. And that's what you want to do when you train for your first marathon as well. I would suggest for most people, it's perfectly sufficient. You add in a little bit of strength training and you maybe do more cardio, maybe something that is not as hard on the joints, something like elliptical, cycling, and stuff like that. Do not underestimate recovery. And for God's sakes, don't go on a weight loss diet. Like, if you are training for a marathon and you are on a really strict regimen for weight loss, you potentially can negatively impact your recovery after your runs, and you're more likely to have injuries down the road. So while you can run while going on a weight loss diet, I would not suggest making that your goal when training for a marathon. That should be something maybe in the off season or something like that. Very careful and slow when it comes to the caloric net, because you don't want to negatively impact the healing of your body. Which brings us back to sleep. So a lot of people ask me, Michael, what can I do in order to recover better? God sakes, go to fucking bed. 8 hours of sleep would be ideal. Maybe even more if you have an intense running plan. Focus on the nutrition, make sure that you have enough protein in your diet. So, and this leads us to the next one. What I mentioned earlier, a plan matters. And the reason it matters because it progressively trains you towards your marathon. Otherwise, you're just doing everything haphazardly and you're more likely to get injured. Rest days, your mileage builds up gradually. You have deload weeks. I cannot emphasize the importance of a training plan enough. And that brings us to strength training and mobility. Does it matter? So mobility is kind of like should you be really super tight, then mobility becomes an issue because it could be restrictive in your motion that you're doing. But strength training, on the other hand, we know has a huge positive benefit on your performance as well as potential of reducing the onset of injuries. So strength training days twice a week is huge, and it already helps you tremendously in reducing those kind of issues. Each marathon usually provides you with refueling stations. So in those, they might have Gatorade or Tailwind or some other product, and those are all great. But if you are not used to that product and you're running and you're at mile 19 and you get gastric distress, that really sucks because now your race goes down the toilet. So make sure that if you're planning to use whatever the race organizer provides, that you're using that in your training leading up to the race on the long days, on the long run days, and you practice fueling and hydration, preferably in the same conditions as the race is. So if the race is warm in the middle of the day and it's hot and nasty and whatnot, and you might want to train at least some in that so that you get used to that, and that you're refueling after your long runs and stuff like that appropriately. So don't starve yourself. Like I said before, it's not the time for a diet. Make sure you train smart, be patient with yourself in the sense of like pulling back if you need to. And then most importantly, nobody pays you for that shit. So might as well enjoy the journey. Take care until next time.